Hello, I am Lisa Patt-McDaniel, and I am the CEO of the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio and host of Workforce 3.0. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Matt Habash, President and CEO of the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, to discuss how food and food insecurity affects work, and also to discuss how the Food Collective is interacting with clients to give them help them get a better quality of life. I hope you enjoyed this discussion.
How many people does the Food Collective employ?
We have full-time employees. Pre-COVID was at 145. We've now added probably north of 150, and we added 26 more temporary folks to the system right now, and we're trying to keep them because they come and go very quickly in that world of temporary help. But the idea is that we would continue this. We have this kind of three-prong approach to getting our work done. Part of it originally was all volunteer help, with thousands of volunteers putting in. We now need 2,700 volunteer hours a week. But now we had to guard. We had 100 of them until August the 7th. Now we're down to about 48. We should have them until the end of the year. Officially, they're here through September 30th, but they think they're going to get extended again to Christmas. And then the rest is this paid group. So we have a combination of those three strategies trying to do the tremendous amount of additional work we need to do as part of this. They were up 25 to 30% in volume going out the door. We used to do 100 and 100 and 200 people a day when our pantry was open, households a day. And we're in the 700-800 range right now down at our own pantry downstairs. So there's a lot of work down there. And it all has to be pre-bagged and done ahead of time because you can't let people shop at the moment. So it's all pre-bagged, put in the trunks of our car.
Yeah, so wow. That's a very huge operation as an employer, let alone for what you do. You know, one of the things that I'm really interested in is this idea of using this data and to identify people who need to get additional credentials, and then surrounding them, the kind of work we're doing with the Economic Mobility Coalition, right? And the piece that the Food Collective would play in that is making sure people don't have to worry about food as one of the things that's essential to them while they would be getting an additional credential in order to get additional employment.
Right. Another part of what I didn't mention about what Nick's, and you saw this in its early infancy when it was called EpiSkill at one of the economic mobility presentations. We're still building that out. And I just authorized him to finish building it out. He needed another $300,000 or something to get it fully built out. And we were doing that promise grant activity with Ohio State. And I said, okay, I'm done with this. You know, it wasn't going through. We weren't winning the bid. We were getting to be a finalist and never getting it. So I said, finish it because we need it. I mean, it's, as you described for us, it's a connective tool that, and I think for the first time, we're looking at this from what's a person looking to do? So aptitude, skilling up, what jobs are you qualified to do or could potentially have an interest in doing, and then go through whatever training program is necessary to skill you up. And on the other end, what are employers looking for? So this whole matching game, which you've been doing in the workforce development world for a long time, but the piece that was never there strongly was the social service piece.
Right.
What are the human service needs that somebody has who's trying to go to school, and as Dr. Harrison says, get their second job, better paying job? What do they need? And we leave it to the individual to have to solve for. In the case of Columbus State, David talks about the fact that he loses 6,000 to 7,000 students a year who've completed one of their 2 years because life happened to them. And it could be something as their tires went flat and they can't afford to put new tires on the car, let alone they need food, they need childcare, whatever the issues are. Housing's the biggest one. So wrapping those services into this app that's being built out is a way of connecting all of this through with the goal of assisting people if they're eligible for SNAP, get them signed up for SNAP, whatever those issues are that would help them complete their education while they're also raising a family and dealing with all the challenges of I think their average age over there is in his 30s, and getting the skilling so people can, but also understanding from the employer end, what job should people be getting trained for, and how do we make sure they get trained? So I think it's a really neat, if nothing else to me, whether the tool manifests and is really used, it's more about us all recognizing the connectivity of this, and we can play a different role. Hence, we put a market right on Columbus State's campus so that the students, and really trying to use the Mid-Ohio market term to get away from the stigma of food pantries, so people feel comfortable. And David did a really smart thing when COVID happened, because they were passing out Chromebooks to people like the grade schools are now, to people who did not have that technology over Columbus State. And they used the market as the distribution point. So all those people not only came to get their Chromebook, but they also discovered they could pick up food, because it was the only thing that was open on campus. And so we kept it open because it also serves the neighborhood on the east side. And it's working. I didn't know that. Yeah, it's working really well, so that people feel comfortable coming in there, taking what they can use. We want you coming back. In our world now, we want you coming every week. Come get produce and fresh food that you can use that week, milk you can use that week. And then you get an opportunity, as we build out the rest of these markets around the community, to wrap services around. So workforce will become a key component in that for people that are looking for jobs, healthcare for people that need certain things. And we're going to make them community specific. So we're excited we're looking for sites in Northland right now. We have a phenomenal site in Reynoldsburg right now, which is a really high need area. There's a lot of low paying jobs over there. That market went from a pantry of $450 a month to now $1,200 a week of families coming in to get food. So that's the success of these centralized, open, they're not quite up to the 30-hour a week that we're hoping to get people to 30 to 40 hours a week. Open when it's convenient for people. We've lost the ability right now to let people have choice.
Right.
You can't. But we've also said to people, if you're hanging with people in your neighborhood and that's your safe cohort of bring the food out and have a food swap. You don't want something, share it with somebody else. You may get something you can use and go that route, to share what you get that you cannot or aren't going to be able to use. But this market strategy and this Ready Skills app to us is the future of our work. It's making food readily available to people, taking that issue off the table as people have to balance all the other challenges in their life.
Yeah, and that is that is one of the major issues we've had in workforce, right? We know we have people who are working, they're working in low wage jobs, and to entice them to go ahead and get a credential that could completely change their income level, and make their lives a little easier, also be in a quality job, right? But how do you do that and say, step away from this very low wage job with no benefits, pay your bills and get this credential for the next, 10 weeks or, 15 weeks. And unless we do things like that, provide them with the food. So like you said, take that right off the table. So
I think we have to. Nick uses the example of his own childcare worker who was working at a daycare. And, he said he picked his kid up, went out to eat, came back and ran to a, retail store. And he walked in the retail store and she's working the cash register. And he's like, okay, this isn't good for this, woman. She's a single mom, has a couple kids, so somebody else is watching her kids all day long. And what she doesn't realize is that retail job's most likely going to get automated. And I don't think that's what we're calculating in all of this. If you've coddled together 2 or 3 part-time jobs to make it, and some of those jobs are going to disappear, then, how are people going to make it if they can't find additional work? So upskilling them and figuring out how to do that and helping them through, whoever decided back in the 70s that you should not be able to get food stamps while you were going to college in Congress was a bad idea.
Yeah, no kidding.
Why not help people while they're trying to get their education? If you're not going to give them free education, why not help them get through that process to a better paying job rather than, well, they're middle class, they shouldn't get access to these benefits. It doesn't make sense. And I think that's the policy changes, the benefit cliffs that we have in healthcare and in food, need to go away. We need to have a sliding scale that allows people to continue to progress. If people are going to turn down a 50-cent an hour raise because it's going to throw them over a benefit cliff, we would all make that same choice. Because it's the right economics for our family. And why not help them? advance and become a supervisor, manager, move up, get a better paying job, as opposed to, no, you're going to, or I'm not a big fan of employer paid healthcare, and I get in trouble saying that all the time, that I think it's a bad move. I mean, when the quality of your healthcare depends upon your employer's ability to pay, that determines, and I've talked to a lot of people, it's like, they offer healthcare, but I can't afford it, so it's not a long-term sustainable solution for us in this country, as most of us work for small businesses, and it's very hard for small businesses to have affordable healthcare.
Right.
You don't get the benefits of having, a large employee base.
Right. Absolutely. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So I know September is Hunger Action Month, and I imagine that means something to you.
It does. It really is an awareness raising month. We usually, and I haven't seen the full plan yet for September, they usually unveil it to me at the last minute. I have a very creative marketing team, and it really is around how do we raise awareness about the issue of hunger, how many people, and we do it through a lot of different lenses. So, we've done it now. We have a lot of assets in the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, so we'll talk about it from a healthcare perspective. We'll talk about it from a fresh food distribution perspective. We'll talk about it from a seniors, or children's perspective, college kids' perspectives. In the past, we've had a lot of symposiums getting people to understand how many students on a university campus, I think it's almost a third, are food insecure, and they're at risk. And this isn't the ramen noodle experiment that everybody, we say has to go through. So it's a lot of it is raising awareness in partnership with ABC Channel 6 has really been our media sponsor for the month. But we do it across the entire country, all at the same time, to truly get people to understand that there are a lot of people in this country, it's north of 47 million prior to the pandemic, that are struggling, with food insecurity issues in a country that produces more food than any other country in the world. And so there's something wrong with this picture, and we could do a lot better. And we have a lot of surplus food. And right now, because of the pandemic, it's a shortage in some products and a huge surplus in other. If you figure kids aren't going back to school to have school lunch and breakfast every day, all that food is not necessarily going to be consumed. It is produced. So how do we tap into that surplus, get it to people that are hungry, and let them improve their lives? So we now see our whole work the impact of our work is in the world, the space of health. Can we have an impact on your health, not just that we feed you today? And we have ways of measuring that now with our healthcare partners by how frequently you come and consume fresh fruits and vegetables and dairy products that we have.
So a question I get asked all the time is what pre-pandemic, there were issues and we had Band-Aids on them, thinking we were going to go along and we'll solve them eventually, right? And then the pandemic hits and it's like ripping the Band-Aid off. If you could pick one of those issues, what Band-Aid has gotten ripped off by the pandemic?
I think it's the one thing that probably scares me the most is the fragility of our food system in this country. We take it for granted, because there are so many food institutions, the peril of the restaurant industry right now and how many of them are closing and aren't going to reopen. That's going to have a huge impact on the job market, because that was a lot of jobs for a lot of people. So I look at it from the impact that, we have a very fragile system. The stats pre-pandemic were 40% of America makes $12 an hour or less. That might have gone up a little bit above that now, but not much. And 40% of America can't pay a $400 emergency bill. That's a lot of people who are living right on the edge of, life happening to them, as I, simply label that they're going to, skid down into, further into, low income poverty. So what do we do about that? And so I think for me, it's pointed out the severity of the challenges in this country and how ill-equipped we are as a country to currently address them. I think that it's, having both a healthcare crisis and followed by an economic crisis, followed by, a racial tension crisis, that's three major issues, and we're not in a position in this country to address them right now in a way that people aren't doing anything but picking sides.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's going to be our biggest challenge. So for us, it's just the numbers, we had the number of people living below 200% of poverty in Franklin County shot up in the last recession, you know, in 07, 08, 09 to over 400,000, and it really never came down. Unemployment shot up, but unemployment came down. You know, we could see through our missing meal index, because we measure where people get their food from and how much comes from their own money in a process we do with measurement resources every year. And you could see income becoming a bigger part of that. But the effect of going to $12 to $15 an hour was, you know, pushing that income up. But it wasn't enough income in the household to move them out of poverty, because I think, as we all know, it probably takes two $15 an hour jobs and one kid in one household. So you got 60 grand to really rise above and have a shot, you know, at continuing to move up. So we saw a little bit of income movement, but it wasn't enough. And now, you know, I don't have any idea what the numbers are going to look like, you know, given all this. So it'll be interesting to see. But we're taking a very long view. That's, for us now, it's like a 3 to 4 year window of recovery, and maybe longer. So we think we're going to be at this a long time in terms of this extra distribution of food that we're doing. It's 25 to 30% higher than we normally did.
Yeah, we are in for the long haul too, with you. So let me see. Oh, you know what? I wanted to ask you if you can speak about the Rise Together report and the Innovation Center, and how you think, I know the pandemic has probably thrown a wrench into that, but the long-term prospect of how that can help Franklin County and help us move towards helping more people out of poverty. What do you think about it? Where do you see it going?
You know, it's probably needed now more than ever. I think the reality of it is, you know, we're going to still live with the blueprint that was created. A lot of people went into, there's a lot of things in there that we can do to improve. There's a lot of policy changes we should be advocating for. You know, we're going to probably take the next few months to hire the executive director. We're now working on a different search process to find the right person to pull that together. But at the root of all of this for us is what we've already started, and I think, and that is addressing the issue of racism as an issue in poverty, as an issue for us. We're not going to end hunger if we don't end racism. So we're stepping into that space of how does a community come together and start to have conversations around racism? What does it look like inside your employer, you know, in your employment base? What does it look like for an individual? How do we bridge the income gap, and probably more importantly, the wealth gap, because the wealth gap's even wider than the income gap in this community, to begin to understand that work differently. So I think it's a very, you know, what I tell people, it's a very long game. This is generational change. So if we're looking for short-term solutions that we think are going to solve these challenges, 40% of America doesn't make a wage that, you know, puts them anywhere near self-sufficiency. We got a long way to go. And so for me, you know, and we look at our work about ending hunger, and the same with the Rising Together. To me, it's ultimately about employment. It's ultimately about wages. And when people in the community say to me, isn't it a nonprofit's job or United Way's job or somebody to fix poverty? And I went, no, it's yours. It's an income measurement at the end of the day. You know, that's what it's measured. It's your salary, your income, your household income, you know, divided by the number of people in your house, in the ratio with the number of people in your household. That's the measurement that we're trying to impact. So therefore, the only thing that counts is income.
That's right.
You know,
and you get income from
all
working.
The other platforms matter. Childcare matters, transportation, healthcare. It's not to dismiss any of that, but when we're measuring the success of removing people out of poverty, it's their wages that ultimately are the measurement of success. So we've really got to work around that level of policy. So, and it's going to take a lot of change in improving the education system, the graduation rates in our high schools, you know, what additional job opportunities are there. And then if the scary part for me is what we talked about already, it's, you know, we call it the tsunami of job loss that's coming due to automation, you know, and if that starts to happen, you know, it makes the job even harder. So it's really hard not to get pessimistic about all of this, you know, but at the same time, I believe, you know, if there's a community that can truly come together to address this holistically, we have the opportunity to do that if we're willing to have the difficult conversations that matter. That's the thing. This community, by and large, is very Midwestern and very shucks, be nice, as opposed to what's really the issues, and can we go through that painful. I've been through 2 sets of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and it is painful to go through, to realize from the 1600s, what's happened in this country. And we've got to begin to realize that and pull that together in a way that is going to manifest in significant change, for each one of us personally, as well as how we see ourselves in relationship to everyone else.
Absolutely. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit again. Tell us what the story is behind Food Bank to Food Collective.
Okay. So here's the old guy. He's been around 36 years and been involved with the food bank from the day it started, as a pantry operator and back before this. And I think they thought I would be their hardest client. I have an own internal team who was really taking a look at all of the work that we were doing that wasn't traditional food banking, which is find surplus food and get it to people that are hungry. And to really recognize that we had a lot of other assets, that we really were building a partnership with healthcare providers and that we now call Mid-Ohio Pharmacy. It really was a prescription writing program for food, and then measuring back how frequently visits people came to seeing really good health outcomes. We did diabetes research back in 11 through 14 with Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation and really looked at the issue of food insecurity and diabetes. So that came back in a way that said, and at the same time, we were leading the national charge to find the next 1 billion pounds of produce. So those two things kind of wove together, healthy food and getting good partnerships with healthcare into a Mid-Ohio, now what we call Mid-Ohio Pharmacy program. The Mid-Ohio Farm started as a collaborative on the south side with Clearfield Elementary, old Clearfield Elementary School, and a farm down there. And we eventually got booted off that site. But we had a second site on the hilltop, and it really for us became a way of how do we show people ways to grow their own food and how to do that in a way that doesn't require a big plot of land. So everything we're doing over there it's high tech on the one hand, but it's pretty simple stuff on the other hand. It's vertical growing, and if you go out there and look at it, it's a bunch of towers that are sitting on a black cloth. So you could actually imagine this being done on asphalt. It could be done on your patio, but you can grow a lot of food in one of these towers, and they don't use a lot of water. Aquaponics, we're going to get into doing some of that. We're going to get into educating kids where their food comes from, and it's not the grocery store. So really get them to understand that. So there's some space in there. So that's our Mid-Ohio Farm. The Mid-Ohio Kitchen was a name. It was recognizing we were getting more and more involved in healthy food. Our entree into the after-school meals program, the daycare feeding, was really around our food is health strategy. And we continue to say food is health, and we've got to provide better healthy choices for people. So what better way to do that than impact kids in a daycare and impact kids in a Boys and Girls Club, operate a restaurant where 70% of the meals are free. So it's not the economic model I would recommend to anybody. But and cook a healthy meal from scratch for people on Tuesday night. So it really was an entree into that, and now we've stepped up. So since the pandemic, we're cooking 16 to 18,000 meals out of the kitchen here at the food bank, which is too small to do that. Serving the homeless folks as they centralized the homeless shelters and had to spread out. They didn't have a way to feed people, so we've stepped up and cooked. Even though we lost our after school because that wasn't going on, we just shifted the chefs to that and said, okay, we'll underwrite the cost of cooking all these meals for people so they get a healthy food choice. So that's what the Mid-Ohio Kitchen embodies, is how to do more of that. And then finally, the Mid-Ohio Market Strategy is a rebranding of food pantries, trying to take the stigma off. It takes an awful lot of courage to cross the threshold of a food pantry. And we're north of 32,000 families who have never, ever asked for help before, who've shown up at one of our wonderful partner agencies across the 20-county footprint since March 1st. So since the pandemic started, we're seeing a lot of people, they've never had to do this before, and they're having to come. So you want people, to treat people in a very dignified way. We want to encourage them. This is not your fault. Please come in and get it. So the market for us becomes a way to practice a lot of things, one of which is have it open when it's convenient. Because when a customer once said to us, I cannot afford to shop at a food pantry, we're like, what? And she said, I got to take a day off of work. My free food just cost me $80. Because the pantry's only open when I'm working. And I really need the food, but I can't afford to lose the $80 because that's rent money. So it really for us became this, rather than have, for example, 120 food pantries in Franklin County, many of which are only open for a few hours a month, to have these key locations around the community that are open 30 to 40 hours a week. People can come in, and then you can wrap around other services as you get to know people into what else do they need by community around, recognizing that our communities are not all the same across Franklin County. And then to do this in our other 19 counties as well, have at least one key location in the county seat. It's open a lot of hours. It's branded as a Mid-Ohio market, so it doesn't have the stigma of a pantry. It's not in a church basement, kind of thing. And then, so that's kind of the thought process. We're not looking to have a lot. We're looking to have these key locations. And then we've got a lot of wonderful pantries, obviously Dublin's one of those, that do a really good job in their communities. And the question is, how do everybody work together so we create a really strong matrix of help around the community and we have fresh food. So we want, it's the opposite of the model. The model in a pantry is come at the end of the month when you're out of food, and we'll give you normally a 3-day supply of food, 9 meals. And the reality is, the people we're helping are not out of everything, but we build a solution as if they were. And we're like, what if we just let them come pick and choose the foods they have? Let them come before they go to the grocery store to see what we have, and then go to the grocery store and spend their dollars or snap on the things that we don't have, rather than us try to provide everything. And we gave them a gallon of milk, and they had already been to the store and bought a gallon of milk. They could have used those couple bucks on something else. So it really is understanding from the customer, and we take everything. Our core value is customer centricity. We changed our language to customer from client a few years, because we want you coming back. We want you getting really good service and feeling good about it, as opposed to this, I got to go to the pantry at the end of the month because I'm out of food. So there's hopefully a lot of that, destigmatizes. And so all of that together, all those perspectives became our Mid-Ohio Food Collective. And it was all done in-house by our own marketing team in-house. So it's a change in our process, and a change in how we think about ourselves, how we talk about our work, and recognizing it's a much broader than just the emergency feeding part of our work.
That's great. That makes sense, because you aren't just a food bank. You have several lines of business in a way. And so I completely understand that. I love that. Okay, so my final question to you is, and maybe it should have been my first question. So you are appointed to my board. So you're actually my boss to the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio. So why do you serve on the board, besides the fact that we corralled you and begged you to join?
For me, we talk about ending hunger, and it's an interesting opening question to ask people, what is their definition of that mean to them? And, because I'll use the example often that, did we end hunger if there's 500 people lined up outside our building and we had enough food to feed them all, so they all got food for the day? Or would somebody show up and say, oh my God, we got a big hunger problem. You got 500 people lined up outside your door. So it really is this juxtaposition of how we view ourselves and view our work that said, that's the feed side of our work. And our old branding language and marketing, we talk about feed and end, or feed the line, shorten the line is what Feeding America uses. And for us, this is on the shorten, on the end strategy. For us, it was around, okay, what's it really look like for us as an organization who's really good at logistics and moving food, to say, and we've got to start to look at the root causes of why people are hungry. If we truly want to end hunger so that somebody does not have to show up at all, they have their own resources, and whatever that looks like, to go to the grocery store and acquire the food. Fundamentally, at the end of all of that, for us, is workforce. For me, it's the number one issue. If you have enough income in your household to buy your own groceries and pay your bills, then you don't need a food pantry, you don't need a food bank, you don't need our emergency food. So for me, it's fundamental. It's a key. We look at it, workforce development and raising income levels, as fundamental to ending hunger. And so when asked, that was the reason I said yes, because for me, it's the number one driver to success for everybody. It's the number one thing we built this country on. So, it's why it's fundamental. And how can we come together as a collective group in this community to really understand what that means. It isn't just get you through your first job, because I didn't want to get into workforce development, for example, from having a community kitchen that trained people to go into the restaurant business if the restaurant wages were still too low. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. You know, I'd be better off training them in forklift, you know, driving, which, you know, Cincinnati Food Bank does really well, because those jobs pay better. You know, it's literally starting to look at, or training in truck driving until there isn't a truck driver needed anymore. You know, in the short term we need them, but long term that's not a good viable option for people. We got to get them, need them now, better be retraining them for their next job. And that's the kind of things I think about when I think about workforce development.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you agreeing to be on Workforce 3.0. And I know we really appreciate you serving on our board too, because your insight and support is really helpful to us accomplishing what is a really important issue. So thank you very much.